Time, of course, now for the press preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Time to see what's making the headlines. With, we hope, fingers crossed, the columnist Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, but also the political journalist and broadcaster Theo Usherwood. Now, they will be with us. Indeed, there she is right now. They will be with us from now until just before midnight. But before we talk to those two, let's run you through those front pages that we have, beginning with the Metro, remarking on the fact that only 15 asylum seekers have taken their places on the controversial Bibi Stockholm barge. The Metro has the headline, "Not all aboard." See what they did there. Here's the Mirror. It reacts to that news, calling the government's immigration policy clueless. The Mail carries the Home Secretary Suella Braverman's praise for the paper's reporting on allegedly unscrupulous immigration lawyers. The Eye reports that Ofqual, the regulatory body for exams, will not be making any dispensation to take account of teacher strikes when marking for A-level students. They are due to receive their results next week. Here's The Guardian. It has the findings of a study linking air pollution to antibiotic resistance. And the Pink and the Financial Times hears that in a difficult environment for private equity firms, they're increasingly offering potential clients sweeteners like discounts on fees. Just a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll be seeing on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages whilst you watch us. But as said, we are joined tonight by Yasmin Alibhai-Brown and Theo Usherwood. Lovely to see you both. And Yasmin, I suppose we should just get straight on into it today, because there is pretty much on the front pages at least only one story in town, that story down in Devon, and it's on board at the Bibi Stockholm. Let's start with the Metro, their headline, "Not all aboard." I mean, I think we all get what they're saying there.
Yeah, they're talking about the fact that there have been a number of legal challenges to what's being done, which is within our law, which is not just British law, but it's international law. And so instead of stuffing whatever number of people they wanted to stuff on this barge, which, as many people have said, firefighters, others, it's a real risk and a miserable place for those who are trying to escape, have escaped and have gone through so much. So that's the Metro front page, and this is a recurring theme at the moment. The lawyers are the problem, which I think is really dangerous for a democracy.
Theo, I suppose, though, if you're being sympathetic to the government on all of this, there was a time when it looked like no one might be getting on that barge. At least the process has begun now.
Yes, they've got 15 on the barge. They had hoped to get 50 going by reports, but there are a number of legal challenges. Care for Calais, the refugee group, managed to stop 20 being placed on Bibi Stockholm today. So from the government's point of view, they have at least managed to get some asylum seekers, 15, onto the barge, when they're still waiting to try and deport anybody to Rwanda. I mean, looking at this through a political prism, if you like, the important thing for the government is that they are seen to do something and appeal to those voters, particularly in contested territories like the Red Wall at the next election, that this country, as they would see it, is not a soft touch, and that if you read inside the Metro, there's one headline about criminal gangs promising migrants who make that perilous crossing often from war-torn countries to this country that they can stay in a hotel. And the point that Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, are trying to make is that actually you won't necessarily stay in a hotel. It won't necessarily be particularly comfortable, and it's going to be you could find yourself on this barge. Now, those on the barge will be able to leave, and they'll be able to access a gym and a canteen. But it is not the same, and the government's at the same time looking to reduce the bill. It's around £6 million a day. The barge, and I think it was Sky News obtained the figures, is considerably cheaper, even when you do it per head. compared to putting people up in a hotel. So the appeal is, from the government's point of view, is that we're not a soft touch, and if you come to this country, you may find yourself having a much less pleasant stay than you might otherwise have expected or been promised by these scandalous criminal gangs who are trafficking people to this country.
Yasmin,
Can I
on you go,
just
please.
come in on this? I really do need to come in on this. We have to remember, nobody, absolutely nobody, goes into exile or leaves their nation or their country unless they absolutely have to. Nobody goes through what these people have gone through. The idea that they're coming here to stay in our hotels is really offensive. And secondly, 15 other European countries, when you take into account population differences, take far more asylum seekers than we do. And here we are objectifying them and turning them into this kind of almost gang of criminals. There are children there, there are women there. There are all kinds of very desperate people
not currently.
who are from countries which we know are troubled. I want to, and British public opinion, recent study in June showed, and there was a study of 29 nations, attitudes towards refugees and asylum seekers. British people had the third most positive attitude towards refugees and asylum seekers. This is not what the public wants.
Sure.
It's what the Tory party thinks it needs.
Sure. Well, just on that basis then, as we take a quick look at the front of the Financial Times and indeed their story, key moment, again, the punning going on today, it seems slightly wide of the mark. I mean, first migrants board the barge. I mean, Theo, if we take what Yasmin is saying at face value then, I mean, what are the Conservatives doing this for, if there is this overwhelming support for migrants and asylum seekers coming to this country and making their place? And so many of us, including myself, have members of their family who arrived here, many, many years ago, particularly after the Second World War. So why are the Tories doing this?
It's about the particular core of voters that the Tories are trying to appeal to. So if you look at where this particular issue, when it comes to migrants crossing the Channel, and I don't disagree with anything that Yasmin has said, by the way. I'm just trying to put forward the argument from the government's point of view. Is that if you look at, it's mainly in Kent constituencies where you've seen these dinghies wash up, and then particularly the Conservative MPs in red wall seats are very worried about what their constituents are telling them. And that's the point, is that the Tories have got to make sure that they hold on to as many of those seats as possible at the next election. And it's also, this policy, a real test now for Keir Starmer. Is the Labour leader, if he becomes Prime Minister, going to keep this barge? Now, electorally, you would have thought that Keir Starmer would say that he'll have to keep the barge.
Didn't he say at one point?
But within his own party, he won't be popular.
But didn't Keir Starmer at one point say he was going to be closing down immigration centres? I mean, if you want an example of a U-turn from the Labour leader, I mean, that's a bit of a cracker.
Yeah, the point for Keir Starmer.
The issue is not whether Keir Starmer has been turning around on so many policies. He must be getting giddy now. The problem is not that we have nowhere to put people. This government, for 4 to 5 years, has failed to duly process those who come. They've almost I feel, and this is my view, they've deliberately built up this problem so they can be seen to be tough on migration. And I just want to ask people watching, is this democracy now, and I mean all parties, all the main parties, only serving red wall voters? Are they the only people who count in this country? Do the rest of us really not matter? I mean, I think this is a vital question. This obsession with red wall voters has I think, completely stricken Keir Starmer into a kind of paralysis. And it's a terrible sight to witness.
Let's let Theo back in.
To see him paralysed by it, and just turning on every pledge but they're all the other main parties. What about the rest of us? We do not like this.
Okay,
We
Yasmin, I just want
feel
to
for these people.
I just want to let.
Count?
Sorry, Yasmin. I just want to let Theo back in as we will take a look at the front page of the Guardian. Their headline: "Reprieve for asylum seekers ordered onto barge." I mean, we'll see what the rest of the papers, how the rest of the papers report the legal action. I suspect some of them will be pretending that is a massive surprise. But are you of the same view, though, Theo, that this week, this small boats week that we are seeing, where we're talking about a maximum of 500 people who can get on this thing, when we've got a backlog in the tens of thousands, is I hate the dead cat. I hate the idea of dead cats. But this does seem like a distraction.
But precisely, I mean, we've got numbers out today, and the Mirror, I think, have led on those numbers, 50,000 in hotels, and this barge is going to take just 500. 15,000 migrants have arrived in this country this year. The barge is not going to solve the problem. That's the point. The point is that the barge sends a message from Rishi Sunak and from the government to those voters that it wants to win over, that it is strong on migration. If you look at the Rwanda policy, that policy hasn't deported anybody yet, but Keir Starmer can't back it because of his own party. And so therefore, Rishi Sunak can say, well, we have a plan to stop the boats. Doesn't matter whether it's successful or not. The point is that Keir Starmer can't support that plan. And so the Tories can turn around and say, well, you're soft on immigration. You won't stop the boats. This is what we want to do. And of course, then what we see is what we've seen reported in the Daily Mail, and we're now seeing come through when it, in precise terms, with these numbers for the Bibi Stockholm, where you've got 50 people were due on this barge, and by all accounts, 35 were stopped because of legal challenges, because lawyers managed to intervene. And that just feeds the narrative that it's lefty lawyers who are stopping the government getting their way on this particular issue. And of course, the prime lefty lawyer that everybody from the Conservative Party is going to be pointing their finger at is none other than Keir Starmer. So politically, this is a really, potentially for Keir Starmer, a really damaging policy, because he's got to, if he's going to stay in lockstep with the Conservatives. And I remember when I was at LBC, Keir Starmer would be asked by, I think, Nick Ferrari, what's your policy on immigration? And he'd proudly say, well, there's actually nothing much between ourselves and the Conservative Party. He wants to be as close as he possibly can to the Tories, so he's not portrayed as being soft on immigration. And policies like this and policies like Rwanda enable the Tories to draw some gap between themselves and the Labour Party and portray the Labour Party potentially as being soft on immigration.
Yeah, let's just take a quick, Yasmin, just 1 second. Yasmin, 1 second. Yasmin, 1 second. Yasmin, 1 second.
And their polls are still tumbling.
Yasmin, just 1 sec. Let's bring in the front of the Daily Mirror here. Just on the topic that Theo was saying there. Look, there is clearly an issue with people coming to this country, a political issue with people coming to this country. If these barges were safe, if they passed all the necessary checks, and it did ultimately save the taxpayer money, is there anything that can be said against housing legitimate asylum seekers in this fashion, Yasmin?
Are you asking me? Sorry.
Yeah, I am, yes.
Sorry. Look, the very sight of this thing, what it looks like, what the firefighters are saying about it, what will we do if disease breaks out on these barges?
That wasn't my question, though. That wasn't my question. If these barges were deemed to be safe by the FBU and others, and they saved money, in principle, what is wrong with housing asylum seekers in this fashion?
I don't think it's fair or humane. Would you listen? I came from Uganda 50 years ago, because Asians from Uganda were expelled. We were housed in army camps all over the country, and they were, on the surface, they were terrible, but we could come and go. We had loads of people around us, wonderful British people who came to see us, to help us, to give us clothes, to give us love. And that helped us get through that period. This is like a kind of floating prison for people who are not tried and tested criminals. They are desperate people from Syria, from Afghanistan, which was our responsibility. So I'm sorry, there is nothing in me, not a cell in me, which can tell you it's fine. It is not fine. And millions of British people are saying that too. And I think we should also be very concerned about these new attacks on judges and lawyers and RNLI, all the good people in our country who are now being demonized because the Tories are falling in the polls. That's the problem. We can say, oh, Labour's terrified of saying anything, and it is to their shame that they are. But the numbers, the Tory numbers are falling. And as they fall, they've declared a war on the most helpless, voiceless and most wretched.
Indeed, indeed. And of course, as our correspondent Mario Rora was saying outside the Home Office, look, the legal challenges have just been started. So I suspect this will be a story on the front pages for days to come. Guys, pause just where you are, because coming up after the break, we'll be discussing this story. The infamous lettuce has returned. I'll be taking a leaf out of the Star's book and discussing that next. Welcome back to the press preview, Theo. Theo and Yasmin still with us. And we're going to go, Theo, to the front of the Star for my story of the day. Explain exactly what is going on here, because it does, to my eyes, look like a lettuce with a wig, a couple of eyes on it and a ribbon attached. What's happening?
To think back to last autumn, and of course, Liz Truss lasted just 44 days in office as Prime Minister. And you'll remember the Daily Star had that webcam with Liz Truss. Well, it was a lettuce, and the argument was that the lettuce shelf life was going to outlive Liz Truss as Prime Minister. And in the end, the Daily Star and the lettuce won out, and Liz Truss was ousted from office. By the time the lettuce was still, well, I think it could still be eaten by somebody should they choose. Now, of course,
proper campaigning journalism
as a departure. Yeah, but it went viral. So for many in journalism, that's the main thing. Now, as a result of departing as Prime Minister, Liz Truss gets an honours list, and she was due to hand out, according to the Times, 14 gongs, mixture of peerages and knighthoods and damehoods. But apparently, the Times is reporting that 2 people have turned down an award from Liz Truss because they simply didn't feel that it was right to accept a gong as a result of only serving a Prime Minister for 44 days in number 10. And you'll remember, of course, this comes off the back of what happened with Boris Johnson, where a number of his nominations for peerages were turned down by the committee that reviews them. So I think what's happened is that a couple of people have said, well, actually, is it right that, given how little time I spent in number 10 working for Liz Truss as Prime Minister, that I receive an award that would be on a par with somebody who might have worked in a charity or worked in politics for many, many years, raised millions of pounds potentially, but I've only done a few days in office, with her working at the heart of government maybe, but for such a short period of time, it just doesn't seem right that I accept this award.
Sure.
It's somewhat of an embarrassment, of course, for Liz Truss, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. Yasmin, briefly, your thoughts on this, because I do want to get onto the football.
Well, this is so interesting, because I think it's also I think a lot of people just don't want to be anywhere near Liz Truss after what she did to the country, and to everybody with any kind of savings and so on. I mean, she was responsible with Kwasi Kwarteng for a lot, and so to take an honour from her, maybe for some people, would really not smell right. So good on them. I wish more people did decline honours for the right reason. This is a good reason. This is the right reason, the right thing to do.
Well, I'll let you know. I'll let you know, Yasmin, when they finally get round to offering me one. But let's have a look, shall we, just very briefly at the story on the front of The Guardian and pretty much everywhere else. The Lionesses, Theo, making it to the quarter-finals. But as Gary Lineker himself pointing out, with a very Beckham-esque moment in the middle of it. It wouldn't be England at a World Cup.
It was, wasn't it? And in the 87th minute, and that stamp from Lauren James, and of course she's been a star of this World Cup for England so far. Having scored 3 goals, 3 assists during the group stages, but lost her cool in that final 3 minutes of normal time, and stamped on one of the Nigerian players, and of course was immediately sent off. Now she's going to be banned for 1 game. From what I've read, that could be extended for another 2 games. She could be out of the tournament should FIFA decide to take further sanction is necessary, but she's out for at least 1 game, so won't be taking part in that match against either Colombia or Jamaica in the quarterfinals. But of course, we're through. We made it through on penalties quite comprehensively. So onwards. And of course, the United States, one of the favourites in the tournament, were knocked out earlier by Sweden. So fingers crossed, despite what happened in the 87th minute, a bit like David Beckham and Diego Simeone back in the World Cup in France, the Lionesses live to fight another day.